Hey everyone, I just wanted to make this video going over RMarkdowns and the difference between an RMarkdown and an R script. So we kind of talked about R scripts already. The scripts are just text documents, and in this case they're saved as a .r file. But all they are just like, words, and the words are interpreted as code unless there's this sort of hashtag which denotes that it's a comment. And this is how, the sort of default way you can code for pretty much any coding language that you're going to be using, but there's also this other way you can do things and also sort of create elegant, flexible, and fast dynamic report generation with R. And it's called an RMarkdown, and it uses this package knitter, which is something that's likely installed in your already, so long as you are downloaded RStudio. So to get to an R Markdown, you just hit this plus button and you can choose between an R script or an R notebook, which is a type of R Markdown document, or you can choose R Markdowns generally. You can also see that there's different types of documents you can create as well. So if you choose R Markdown, you can notice already that, remember with how it's like getting a report or generating a report, the report that you're going to be able to generate from here are selected from here. So you can choose to generate an HTML report, a PDF report, and a Word report. And I'll show you some examples of how that looks. And the nice thing about R Markdown right now, and also how RStudio is set up, is that if you say HTML report, you can say title, say example markdown, and click OK, and it'll actually generate a document that already has some information about what an R Markdown is, and that's what this is here. And so we'll just go through this example that they give already. So if you see that there's this header here, which is denoted by the dash dash dash, and then these options here. You can set more options actually as well, but you can see that it has a title, it has the author, the date, and this is called a YAML header, Y-A-M-L. It's not super important, but it is just something to be aware of if you're looking to how to change that. You can find more about this in this, if you pretty much just Google knitter, you'll find this URL, and you can go and look at a bunch of different options and everything. This will just be going over it generally to show that it exists and it can be useful potentially for you. And I would recommend you choosing whether or not you like it or not, and then if you figure out, yes, I like it, and you can do all your coding in R Markdown if you want to, or you could just stick with sort of the default option that a lot of people use as an R script. And there's only one example where I would say that an R Markdown wouldn't necessarily be a good choice for coding. So what you can see here is that this is an R Markdown, and Markdown documents we haven't talked about yet, but Markdown documents actually, instead of being like an R script where the default is that the values here are code except if there's a hashtag, here it's the opposite. Here everything is text except if it's in a code chunk. And that's what all of these three things are. So if you go over here and sort of let's make some space at the bottom and click insert, you can insert an R code chunk. You can even insert other types of code. And but you're probably never going to use that if you're just going to be coding in R, but you can insert an R code. You can even type it in as well. If you notice what the syntax is here, it's the apostrophe, or sorry, it's more the accent mark, and then the parentheses or brackets R, and you're good to go then, and it thinks it's an R code chunk. It doesn't have an end though, so you put another 3 tick marks to show that it's the end. And so if you can also name the chunk, so you can say that this is chunk example, and you can see, oops, that didn't look right. You can see that this name here actually appears here as well. Not a big deal, but it can be nice to name a code chunk and everything. And so what do those documents actually look like? So we can actually I mentioned it's creating an HTML document. So if you click the knit button here, you need to save the document. So I'm just gonna save it as example. And it's going to knit, and you can see that it's doing that down here, that it's running through and knitting the thing. You'll see that you'll have a new RMarkdown tab over here, and you see that it had a pop-up. And so this pop-up is what it looks like this. And this is actually an HTML document. So that is to say, I could take this document and send it to you, put it on Canvas. I could do just send it to a collaborator if I wanted to, and this is exactly what they would see. They didn't have to run any of the code, they just get this document. So very similar, like if you would wanted to make this into a PDF document or something like that. So it's a way to integrate code and plots and figures and tables in one document. So you can see this header here that we're saying the YAML header becomes the header that's shown here. Then this hashtag is representing to say that it's like a heading section. It's basically the font size that you can do, and so it makes it a larger header, and then it gives you the text. It appears here. You can include links in the text, just like how they did here, just using the sort of brackets there. And you can see you can do some little bit of text formatting. You can make knit, for example, bold by using two asterisks next to it. I believe if you just use one asterisk next to it, it actually makes it so it'll be italicized. So now if I knit the document, it's going to run through the code. And that is an important thing to note as well. So there's ways you can change this, but it's kind of also reproducibility type of thing, is that every time you run the code, it will every time you knit the document, it will rerun all of the code that's in the document. So you can see that now instead knit is italicized. So it's a way to basically make some almost publishable or reports, and also you can do a lot of other things with it. Some people build websites using sort of like R Markdown and notation in R. Some people build presentations in R, and it can be really useful in that manner if you want to send, again, like notes to collaborators. So if you're interested in this, I would just recommend you like looking into Knitter, also just reading through sort of the exam. If you start a new notebook, our notebook, they give you a little bit different documentation about inserting code chunks. So again, you can type it in. Oh, I forgot, there's also a shortcut that's really handy. It's Control-Alt-I. I imagine in a Mac that'd be Command-Alt or I don't know if, but you can try Command-Alt and then I, and you'll be able to just get a code chunk in here. So I was saying before that you can code in R Markdowns, and even if you don't want to necessarily generate a report. And it can be a nice way to organize your thoughts and organize your code. Again, because you're able to write text, you're able to explain both the point of the document, but also you can use comments within the code and, say this is summary of the cars data set, or cars values, or whatever it ends up being, right? So you can add comments about the actual code that you're running, and you can also have this text that kind of explains the sort of thought process behind it. And so this is what I actually ended up doing. So I'm trying to publish this paper, and so this is some of the code that I used for it, where I have this header. You can also put a date in here, and I'm also able to say, here's this analysis, and here's what it does. And this is how you format in a Markdown for, you do tab, asterisk, space, and then you'll get bullet points. And so I'm able to say what the point of the document is, and then have the code chunk for installing packages or downloading some data, and then kind of explaining some other things about the sort of analysis that I can or can't do. So if I wanted to, I can click preview, and in this case, I have the text always appears pretty much in a preview, but you notice that the code doesn't appear because I set an option in this chunk options for, well, actually the default is echo equals false. Echo is this option that means that it will not show the code that you generated. Again, if you're sending it to a collaborator or something like that, and you're like, well, they don't really need to see the code that I used because they're not interested in that, and I just want to make, like, you can make plots this way, and it is a nice way if you, again, wanted to just, here's some plots, and here's the output. You can even include tables in here. This is what the tables would look like as you run through, and it's kind of a nice little table where there's actually, if you notice here, the table is only 2 columns, but there's 427 rows. This shows the first 1 of 10, but there's actually, you can have a little option here to keep on going down. So it is a nice little tool set. Also, if you have too many columns, you can view the columns by going left and right like that. And it could be nice to have this kind of document if you are going to publish the code, to be able to explain it or work with it. I find it pretty useful because if I'm going to run code, for example, you can just hit this play button and you will run just the one that you, just this code, and you can be very specific about it. You can see also it'll show you an error that, like, I didn't have everything loaded into this package, or into this folder or file, so like this wasn't able to run, and it shows you where the error was in particular, what line led you to an error, and then the results that were printed to the console are down here, so you see this error, but the results from it are also out here. So if you wanted to, let's go back to the sort of example markdown. Here's the code chunk, and I did this plot before. I'm going to set x to be 1 to 10, and let's do y is equal to 1 through 10 as well. If I plot this, it actually puts the plot below, as you can see from the other example untitled, this one, where it was talking about the plots will come sort of below. And so it's really nice to see, you can see the sort of the results of that code in particular right next to the code that ran it and generated it. And so it could be a way, and the reason I like to code in, using an RMarkdown, even though I don't typically share my, I don't usually generate PDFs or anything, or HTML files that I'm sharing with people necessarily, but the reason I like it is just because of how it's organized. I like the idea of having the code just in one sort of chunk and being like, okay, here's this chunk, as you can see, that where I'm going to load the various packages that are needed for this script, this markdown script. And if you want, you can just run a single chunk and get those results out, or you can hit run and you can do run all, or Control-Alt-R on a PC. So again, this was supposed to be just more informative and to let you decide whether or not you want to have an R Markdown or an R script. And so there are ways of converting an R Markdown into an R script if you ever do need to run it this way. I did it for this document, and you can see that there's a lot of code here in the script, about 385 lines of code, and you can imagine like having it set into chunks is a little bit more digestible. Even for me, who's familiar with this code, I can very easily see like, oh, this is what I'm doing for this in this section. So I hope you found this useful. The only other thing that I would say regarding R scripts and R Markdowns in terms of why an R script might be better, like I said before, it is kind of the default to use an R script. So some people, especially if they have a computer science background, will be much more familiar with an R script. So if you're collaborating with them or something, sending them an R Markdown might be a little bit confusing. And the other thing is, if you're ever going to run code on a server somewhere, the R Markdown notations and everything will probably make problems happen in the server system, server side. So like I said, you can pretty easily convert it to just the code and extract the code. It's another thing again with this knitter package. And if you're wondering, just because I know it off the top of my head, it's this knitter package. So you can say library knitter, or you can use 2 colons, and that will let you use functions from a package. And you just hit Perl and then the name of the document that you want to convert, and it will make an R script. So you have to use the quotes and then say, this one is called O4 analyze TCGA, and then if I hit tab, hopefully there was to be something, except I misspelled some stuff, so it's not it'd be .r MD, and it would convert it to or it'd create another file that would be a .r. So it is pretty useful to go back and forth between them, or it can be if you're going to, again, run things on the server and everything. But it is more complicated, as you can see. There's a lot more that you can do, so I'm not going to be able to go through, unfortunately, everything in terms of what you can do with the options. So again, you're using this knitter package, and you can set chunk options. Right now, the echo is equal to true in this example document, and that means that the code is going to appear in the final document, except if you have these individual, this one is options. If you notice that this is a kind of calling code that is setting the options for all the chunks, and you can also set individual options. So you can say echo is equal to false, or I could do something like this and say include equals false, and now all of the things are, it won't be included at all. So if I hit the knit button again, so this is going to be the same document you've seen before, but all of a sudden it doesn't actually have that section where it gave you that table about the summary of cars. It doesn't show the code or anything. So a lot of different options you can set in using an RMarkdown. But like I said, it can be nice to kind of organize things in a different way. So I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.